on the threshold of the dawn of an era covered in myths and miracles, a time in which anointed kings and visionary prophets roam the vast and arid terrains of the Promised Tierra, a captivating story of maternal courage, profound injustice, and unbreakable faith unfolds in ancient pages of the second book of Samuel. This forgotten chapter transports us through the ages of time to a tumultuous period beneath the reign of David, a monarch whose history is marked both by his great achievements and by his notable human failures. In this historical context, the figure of Rispa emerges, a woman of humble origin whose life is shaken by a tragedy of epic proportions. Rispa, mentioned briefly in sacred texts, is the mother whose suffering and determination reveal a strength that spans the ages. Amid palace intrigues and war conflicts, she faces one of the most painful trials a mother could endure: the execution of her children as part of an attempt to settle ancient disputes and curses over the kingdom of Israel. Her account of her solitary vigil, protecting the inanimate bodies of her children against the wildest beasts and birds of prey, speaks of a maternal love that defies the very laws of nature. This act of courage on the ground illustrates the strength and resilience of a woman faced with an indescribable loss, but also serves as a powerful testimony of the complexity of human emotions and the capacity for faith in the face of the most severe adversities. Rispa's narrative invites us to reflect on eternal themes such as justice, sacrifice, and redemption, resonating with readers of all ages and crossing the barriers of time and culture. By revisiting her story, we are reminded of the profound lessons that could be found even in the darkest moments of human history, illuminating our understanding of the past and possibly guiding our steps in the present. In the fabric of the biblical narrative, intertwined with real dramas and mystical revelations, we find the story of Rispa, a woman whose existence, yet marked by the stillness and the shadow of a glorious past, became central in one of the episodes most moving of the scriptures. Rispa, the concubine of the ancient king Saul, saw the days of power and splendor of her seigneur's reign fade from her, relegating her to a life of darkness on the fringes of royal society. Even though her name is not remembered in the grand salons of justice and is not celebrated in the lyrical songs of the poets, her narrative is immortalized by the intensity of her pain and the strength of her spirit. The scenario of this story began to take shape during a time of great adversity for Israel. During David's subsequent reign, the land suffered the weight of a devastating hardship that lasted for 3 consecutive years. This calamity, which afflicts young and old, rich and poor, leads King David, known for his deep faith and determined action, to seek answers in the depths of the divine oracle. The answer he receives is as unexpected as it is dark, revealing the depth of heavenly justice and the weight of human acts. The Hambruna, as it is revealed, is not a simple whim of destiny, but a direct retribution for the blood unjustly spilled by King Saul against the Gibeonites, a pueblo that is under the sacred protection of a pact with Israel. This divine enlightenment on the ground marks a turning point in the way David ruled his village, but also imposed a terrible weight on Rispa's shoulders. The required expiation involves a painful sacrifice. The descendants of Saul, specifically the children and children of Rispa, are chosen to be handed over to the Gibeonites in an attempt to appease the divine wrath and restore the natural order. The description of her suffering and the way in which Rispa faced this tragic problem is a moving testimony of her fortitude. With an iron determination, he watches over the bodies of his children, exposed to the elements and birds of prey, in a vigil that evokes both the depth of maternal love and the complexity of questions of justice and redemption. The story of Rispa, which is permeated with sadness and sacrifice, speaks powerfully through words. It invites us to reflect on the interactions between divine destiny and human responsibility, on the power of family ties that never let death break, and on the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. These themes, vital for the understanding of scriptures and human nature, are universally resonant, offering valuable lessons for all ages and cultures. When revisiting Rispa's life, we are reminded that even in the shadows of oblivion, stories of great courage and unconditional love can shine with a light that spans the ages. In the heart of one of the darkest intersections of divine justice and moral dilemmas in biblical tradition, we find King David, whose reign is marked by both profound blessings and severe trials. The narrative deepens when faced with a terrible disaster that has ravaged Israel for 3 years. David desperately seeks a solution that will restore order and prosperity to his village. In his search for answers, the divine oracle reveals that the root of the calamity is not natural, but the direct result of the transgressions of Saul, the predecessor of David, against the Gibeonite Pueblo, protected by a sacred pact. David's response to this revelation is a testimony of his commitment to divine justice and the stability of his kingdom. To appease both the Gibeonites and God himself, he is compelled to make an agreement that transcends simple material transactions, an agreement that would not involve silver or gold, but the incalculable price of human life. The Gibeonites, seeking to repair the injustice suffered, do not demand wealth or earthly compensation. It demands a form of justice that, in its essence, is as dark as it is definitive, requesting the delivery of 7 descendants of Saul to be executed and collected in Gibeah, an act that symbolizes the purgation of spilled innocent blood. David's election, although guided by the need to respond to this dark request, is made with a weight in his heart. Of the descendants of Saul, of the sons of Rispa, together with 5 grandchildren, they are marked for this cruel destiny. The execution is carried out and their bodies are left exposed on the hill placed in front of the Seigneur, in a scene that reflects the seriousness of the expiation demanded. This moment in the biblical narrative is not just a chronicle of an act of retribution, but also a deep study of character and leadership. David, by consenting to the request of the Gibeonites, demonstrates his unbreakable adherence to divine law and at the same time reveals the emotional and ethical complexities that a ruler must face. Meanwhile, Rispa's reaction to the fate of his children becomes a powerful symbol of resistance and maternal love. His surveillance over the bodies of his children, protecting them from animals and inclement weather, turns into an act of silent defiance and unbreakable human dignity. This episode, deeply rooted in justice, sacrifice, and redemption, comes to an end through time, offering a mirror for our own fights with moral dilemmas, the sovereignty of law and the naturalness of justice. It invites people of all ages to reflect on the costs of leadership and the prices paid in the name of peace and the moral order, illuminating on the ground the paths of ancient faith, as well as the ongoing quests of humanity for equity and reparation. At the heart of this biblical narrative, where divine justice and human tragedy intertwine in an indissoluble way, the heroic and tragic figure of Rispa emerges. With her children unjustly sacrificed in an effort to appease both divine and human wrath, Rispa stands out on the ground as a mourning mother, as well as a symbol of unbreakable resistance. Dressed in a bag, the traditional fabric of mourning and penance, and covered with cenizas, she embodies the pain and determination of a mother who faces adversity with a strength that defies understanding. To take on the task of guarding the bodies of her children, Rispa positions herself on the hill where they were raised, killing birds of prey during the day and saving animals at night. His vigil for her lasts for months, a living testimony of his love for her and her filial devotion. Under the burning sun that marks the seasons of summer and even later under the incessant rains of autumn, she remains motionless and vigilant. Her presence on the hill became a fixed point in the landscape, a figure of mourning that resists on the ground the implacable forces of nature, as well as the failures and cruelties of men. This scene of deep symbolism on the ground illustrates maternal love in its purest and most ardent form, but also highlights the human capacity to face and defy the greatest adversities. Rispa, in her loneliness and pain, defies the conventions and expectations of her time, becoming a representation of female resistance in a world largely dominated and decided by men. Her story, although permeated with sadness, is also a source of inspiration, teaching about the strength of the human spirit and the power of unconditional love. Through months of vigil, Rispa on the ground protects the bodies of her children from physical degradation, which also preserves the memory of her dignity, defying the very nature of the penalty that was imposed on them. Her attitude, marked by a combination of humility and haughtiness, directly challenges King David and ultimately leads to a change in the way the dead are treated, returning them to a suitable tomb. This turn in the narrative on the ground concludes her act of vigilance, a bell that also reaffirms the profound impact that a solo individual can have on the history and politics of her time. Rispa, with her story immortalized in the scriptures, continues to provide a source of teachings about resistance, dignity, and the transformative impact of action guided by love and justice. It comes back through generations, touching hearts and minds, inviting everyone to reflect on the scope of our own actions and the legacy we chose to leave. May the story of Rispa transcend the pages of ancient chronicles to serve as a perpetual reminder of the human capacity to face injustices with dignity and courage. The journey of this mother who alone faced destiny and transformed a personal tragedy into a legacy of justice and mercy emerges as a powerful call for all of us. In times of challenge and despair, let us remember Rispa, who with an unbreakable determination and a maternal love that surpassed all her expectations, defied conventions and authorities, remaining firm in her solitary vigil over the bodies of her children. Her story is not just a testimony of her time, but a timeless lesson on the impact that a person can have in facing adversity with strength and honor. In her example, we find a source of inspiration to face our own difficult moments, reminding us that even in the darkest circumstances, we can act with integrity and influence significant changes. Rispa teaches us about the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of persisting in the search for justice even when such a search seems lonely or futile. She highlights that acts of bravery are not only those that are publicly recognized and celebrated, but also those silent gestures of resistance and devotion that often remain invisible. Therefore, may Rispa's memory inspire each of us to adopt a stance of resistance and hope in the face of injustice. May her legacy motivate us to act with compassion and courage, transforming our own fights into a fairer and more merciful future. By her example, we remember that each one of us has the power to make a fundamental difference, shaping on the ground the course of our lives, as well as that of communities and nations in our surroundings.